first began my study of melanin about 5 years ago, it led me to other substances that produce the melanin. And one of the substances that produced the melanin, of course, was the inner eye, or what we call the third eye, or what the Europeans call the pineal gland, which is in the center of the brain. And the pineal gland produces a hormone that goes on to produce the melanin. And this is why I wrote this chart up here, melanogenesis, the beginning of melanin. The beginning of melanin, or the manufacture of melanin, actually starts with Ra, with the sun. And then the rays of the sun go on to hit our eyes, especially the pupils or the darker parts of our eyes. When the rays of the sun hits our eyes, brothers and sisters, it stimulates our eyes, and those rays go to the center of the brain by way of a pathway, which they call the neural pathway. On this neural pathway, it leads to the center of the brain, to a tiny group of nerve cells. And those nerve cells are the actual pineal gland. The pineal gland is a cluster of nerve cells that's in the center or in the midbrain. Now, when these nerve cells are stimulated, or what they call innervated, then it goes on to secrete or to put out the hormone melatonin, which goes on to deposit the melanin in our cells, in our pigment cells. So the pineal gland is the inner eye, or the third eye, in the midbrain, and melanin is the substance that colors our skin, our eyes, and our hair. So when we talk about melanin, we're talking about color. We're talking about pigmentation. Now, again, as I stated before, this is something that we take for granted, brothers and sisters, but Europeans do not take melanin for granted. They take the pigment very, very seriously. They're working in the lab 24 hours a day in shifts here in the United States and also in Japan, because those groups of peoples are the peoples in the earth or on the earth that have the least amount of melanin. So they know that our melanin will save their lives. So they're working to duplicate, to make carbon copies of this substance that's in our pigment cells, or in our cells in general. Now, I mentioned the word melanocytes. What do I mean when I say melanocytes? Let's take a look at this word, melanocytes. Melanocytes are the color cells. Melanocytes are color cells. They are the cells that hold the melanin. And it's an interesting thing about the melanocytes, brothers and sisters, because there are the same number. Africans and Europeans have the same amount of melanocytes, but they have a different structure and we have a different function. Our melanocytes act as individual melanocytes. They're dispersed more throughout our skin cells. But the melanocytes, or the color cells of Europeans, are more grouped together. So these are our color cells. Okay? In Africans, they are dispersed more individually in our skin cells, but in Europeans, they're grouped more together. Also, the color cells in our skin are larger. Our melanocytes are larger. With Europeans, there's a much more smaller. And for African people, we are genetically programmed to produce more melanocytes. There's a genetic and automatic genetic program in us that produces more and different structure melanocytes, or color cells. Now, this is the really heavy point about melanin. I mentioned genetically programmed for us. They are deprogrammed not to produce as many melanocytes, and their melanocytes, as I just stated, are smaller. This is the catalyst that actually spurs the production of the melanin. Tyrosine is an amino acid, and it's found in all dietary proteins. In Africans, the tyrosine is accepted. As long as we are getting some type of food with protein in it, then our cells accept tyrosine, the amino acid or the enzyme. But Europeans are genetically programmed to not accept tyrosine. That's the biggest difference between Africans and Europeans. We are genetically programmed to accept the catalyst that actually produces the color, whereas Europeans, they don't accept it. I don't care how much dietary program or protein they have, they cannot accept tyrosine. They are genetically programmed to not accept the tyrosine, the catalyst to actually producing the melanin. That is what makes us different from Europeans. Okay. Now, an interesting subject is what's in the melanin. As the sister stated and the brother stated, I'm from Detroit. And when we were in a lecture at Wayne State University, a sister asked, well, what's in the melanin that makes it so important? What's in the melanin that makes us genetically stronger? Well, melanin consists of 4 very, very important chemicals. First, in the melanin is oxygen, which is a cleanser. When we go outside to breathe in the air, our body